Digital assets maintained by the firm are some of the most valuable items desired by individuals committing computer fraud. We can all remember a recent hack into a large retailer's debit card database file. Each time, these breaches caused the company and the resulting financial institutions enormous amounts of cost to replace all the compromised cards and refund any fraudulent transactions. Fraud can be defined as any illegal act or characterized by deceit, concealment, or violation of trust. These acts are not dependent upon the threat of violence or physical force. And we've also established that the responsibility really lies with management for establishing and monitoring all aspects of the entity's fraud and risk assessment prevention activities. According to the fraud triangle, there must be three conditions present for a fraud to be perpetrated, and those being incentive, there's got to be reason to commit the fraud, opportunity, there has to be an opportunity for the fraud to be perpetrated, and there's usually a way that the offender will rationalize. Going back to our other example, whether it's your debit card information that crooks are after or your personal identity information, they can sell it to others for personal gains. Now, we are vulnerable in several different ways here. Some common computer frauds would be theft, misuse, or misappropriation on our readable records and files. Could also be on altering the logic of our computer software, of our computer readable information. There could be corruption, illegal copying, or intentional destruction of the computer software, as well as the hardware. Now, given all these different possibilities, it's management's responsibility to estimate the potential loss of the given different types of exposure to fraud. And management is going to do this through fraud risk assessment, which is just a systematic approach to assist management, as well as internal auditors, in discovering where this fraud may occur and who may commit it. And it's also comprised usually within the enterprise risk management program. Some steps that they'll have to go through is to identify relevant IT risk factors, identify for potential IT fraud schemes, the mapping of the existing controls to potential fraud schemes and identifying any gaps, testing operating effectiveness of fraud prevention and detection controls, and assessing the likelihood that the business impact of a control failure and or fraud incident. Let's take a look at some computer fraud schemes just to get ourselves familiar with what could possibly happen. So here we have a scenario of 195 illegitimate driver's licenses are created and sold by a police communications officer who accidentally discovers she can create them. So here the oversights would be a lack of authentication and role-based access control requirements, as well as lack of segregation of duties. Next scenario, a special function to expedite handling of cases allows 2 caseworkers to pocket $32,000 in kickbacks. Here we've got insufficient attention to security details in an automated workflow process. Or an employee realizes that there is no computerized control in his firm's system, so he entered and profited from $20 million in fake health insurance claims. That was a lack of consideration for security vulnerabilities posed by an authorized system access. Here we have an 18-year-old former web developer uses backdoors he inserted into his code to access his former firm's network, spam its customers, alter its applications, and ultimately put the firm out of business. And there is just simply a lack of code reviews. How about a computer technician uses his unrestricted access to customer systems to plant a virus on their network that brings the customer system to a halt? Or we could have a software engineer that did not document or back up his source code intentionally and then deleted the only copy of the source code once the system is in production. Here we've got a lack of enforcement of documentation and unrestricted access to all customer systems. In the system maintenance phase, we could have a foreign currency trader cover up losses of $691 million over a 5-year period by making unauthorized changes to source code. Again, that would be lack of code reviews. Or a logic bomb sits undetected for 6 months before finally performing a mass deletion of data on a telecommunications firm. And here we'd have ineffective backup processes. So a good place to start here probably would be a fraud prevention program, considering all those different fraud schemes we just looked at. A fraud prevention program starts with a fraud risk assessment across the entire firm, taking into consideration the firm's critical business divisions, processes, and accounts performed by management. The audit committee then often works with the internal audit group to ensure that the fraud prevention and detection program remains an ongoing effort. Lastly, communicating the firm's policy file to employees is one of the most important responsibilities of management. It would also be important to have a fraud detection program that should include an evaluation by internal auditors on the effectiveness of a business's processes. Okay? That should also include an analysis of transaction level data, internal controls, and identify indicators of fraud or actual fraudulent activities. And of course, always you should have a continuous monitoring system. The best thing to do is to be constantly looking at your processes, procedures, and having somebody follow up. That completes our look at computer fraud and abuse. Thanks for joining in.